Alrighty, give a little bonus feature here right at the end. Go over something that's not always gone over in other videos or by other teachers. So we have 5 fingers on the bow. What do each of the 5 fingers do? Our thumb underneath here should be bent. Get a good shot of that. Our thumb should be bent. We want our thumb to be bent, and generally it's going to be pointing forward in the way it's bent. With the tip of the thumb, you can see the indent there on the tip of my thumb being what is actually contacting the bow. I favor placing my thumb right here. Some people say put it right there. Whatever works for you and your hand and your way you play. But it's going to be the tip of the thumb. We're not going to jam the thumb up in there. Alrighty, what does the thumb actually do for the bow? The thumb basically supports the weight of the bow. It's actually the only thing that sits underneath the bow aside from the strings themselves. So when the bow is not on the violin, the thumb is what is supporting the weight of the bow from the bottom. When the thumb is on the violin, or when the bow is on the violin or viola, we can, in actual practice, tilt this down again, we can, in actual practice, take the thumb off of the bow and still be just fine. Like 4 fingers, no thumb, and I'm doing just fine because the strings are what are holding up the bow. That's really helpful to understand. The strings are what are going to hold up your bow most of the time. The thumb actually doesn't have to do as much work. All right, what's the next finger we'll look at? Let's look at the pinky back here. The pinky is both useless and super important depending on what you're doing, on when you're trying to do it and what level of ability you're trying to be at. Obviously, when the bow is not on the string, the pinky has to do a lot of work. It is what counterbalances the whole weight of the bow. The thumb is the fulcrum point. The pinky does most of the work of holding the weight. There's a little bit of engagement here with this finger because it's behind the thumb, but most of the work is the pinky. If you're a beginner, you've probably noticed that the pinky is really, really tough because it wants to lock out like this. With time and practice and just holding your bow like this and being really conscientious and keeping a nice round in your pinky, eventually your pinky will strengthen enough that it'll be able to do this right here, no problem. Now while I'm at this angle, notice something interesting about my pinky. You see how it is here on the inside of the bow? It's not on the top of the bow, it's not on this far side, rather it's on the inside. You'll notice the back of your bow is octagonal in shape. There's a top flat piece, and then there's this inside 45-degree angle flat piece. That is where you want to set your pinky. See, I've got my nail just above where it's not going to be in the way, obstructing my pinky, and it's just all the meat of my pinky pressing into that 45-degree angle. That does 2 things for me, 3 things actually. Number 1, it allows my pinky to press into the bow some, which helps keep the pinky from sliding off the bow. When it's up here, it's more likely it's going to just slide off like that. Down here, it's more stable. 2, I've still got a downward force applied to the bow to help counterbalance the weight of the bow so I can support the bow. And then 3, when I tilt the bow at an angle, I've still got a good grip point there. When I tilt the bow at the angle from the top here, then this top portion is actually tilted downwards, and that's no bueno. So that's where we want our pinky, is on this 45-degree inside angle. Try to keep it curved, but this takes a little bit of strength training. If you'll just hold the bow like this for like 30 seconds, a couple of sets of 30 seconds each day, this will strengthen up and you'll be able to do that. What does the pinky actually do though? Why do we need it? Well, obviously when the bow is not on the string, we need it. Likewise, once we get down here on the bow, we need the pinky to help counterbalance the bow, otherwise it'll flop over. And when we're on the A string, that flop over will mean we'll be in the D string. We don't want to be in the D string, right? So there you go. That's one thing the pinky does. Another thing the pinky does is it helps a lot with when we need to do spiccato, because the spiccato is an off-the-string bow stroke. Likewise, if we're just doing retakes, we have to take the bow off the string. My pinky's starting to hurt now. And so that's another time we need to use our pinky. The last thing that I find my pinky really, really helpful for is actually limiting bow bounce. So when I am doing full straight pulls of the bow, I find the pinky can be helpful to ground the bow and to prevent it or deter it from starting to bounce as I go through the more dangerous parts of the bow. I have a whole video on that that I either have got up or I'm about to get up. So you'll want to check that out if you have issues with bow bounce. Likewise, when I'm bowing down in this area of the bow where it tends to be bouncier, keeping the pinky down can help me to applying a little weight through the back of the pinky and the back of the hand can help me to keep the bow grounded and keep it from bouncing when I don't want it to. All right, otherwise, we don't need our pinky. You can get all the way out. Once you start to get out to maybe around here, the pinky can come clean off the bow. It's just completely not used at all. It's really not necessary. And when you get out to the tip, if your pinky has to come off the bow in order to get to the very tip of the bow, don't worry about it. Go for it. There is absolutely no reason for the pinky to stay on the bow when you're out at the tip. In fact, if you watch videos of Itzhak Perlman, he will pretty much, when he's down in this area, he'll keep his pinky down. But as soon as he gets beyond a certain point when he no longer needs it, it just pops right up. I actually watched one video of him. It was really quaint. He would just do this little like rounding motion with his pinky every time he got down here and he needed it again. It was just a little extra fancy. It's Perlman's own take on the use of the pinky in the bow. So that's the pinky. It's really great for supporting the weight of the bow and also can be helpful on the string with helping to prevent bow bounce sometimes. Alrighty, what about this guy right here? Well, we just went over the main thing that this finger right here will do. It really can help a lot with helping to keep the bow straight. But that's something that once you learn how to do it, should become a pretty basic back of the mind, not even conscious thought anymore sort of thing that happens as you bow. All right, this guy right here generally should sit right on the opposite side of the thumb, or in my case, it sits a little bit behind the thumb. And other than that, it does nothing. I take that back. Both of these fingers I find are really important for doing one more thing. So a problem my students will get into, they'll do this sometimes. This, I mean, when we get out towards the tip of the bow, we might end up kind of with a very, whatever you want to call this hold on the bow. But I find that having this deeper hold where these fingers come down around the frog helps to stabilize the bow in my hand. And when I've got to go really hard on the power, when I've got to give a lot of weight into the bow, this helps to stabilize the bow in my hand. When I get out to the tip, again, I might have to get a little bit more like this, but then it always comes back to this as I come back up towards the frog of the bow. So these fingers I do find do a lot to help stabilize the bow as well in my hand when I'm working with it, especially when I'm being aggressive. Alrighty, and last but not least, we have the index finger, and the index finger sits generally between these two knuckles. When you first start out, you might be a little bit more like this. That's okay, but we want to try to get it back to where it's between these two knuckles. And where it actually sits may change a little bit depending on what you're doing. We've discussed its role in adjusting the angle of the bow. This is also the finger in which, when we're giving weight, all that weight generally gets translated into the bow through this finger. Not so much these fingers down here, the pinky. Maybe a little bit might be back here, but it's like maybe 10% and 90% is the weight from this finger. Otherwise, you know, there are certain times if you want to pinch the bow, you might put a little weight through this finger again, but that's basically it for this finger, is it's all about the weight and angle control. All right, I think that's everything. I don't think I've left anything out. It was pretty comprehensive. One last bonus feature. So, holding the bow, one last thing that's really helpful to keep in mind that sometimes teachers miss or students don't pick up on is how much effort do we actually need to exert to hold the bow. And it is that much effort right there. Right at the point where the bow will start to slip through your fingers, that is how much effort you need to exert to hold your bow. And the reason is that the violin or viola is going to support the weight of the bow anyways, so you don't need to hold on to it too tightly because the instrument's got it. The other reason is that if we have a good cradle for our fingers are really sticky and grippy, and so they're going to do an amazing job of just holding the bow. without having to actually apply any significant force, because our fingers are really sticky and grippy. And I mean, you can take all the way down to 2 fingers and still, look at that bow, it's not going anywhere. Let's see if I can do it with the pinky and the thumb. I don't think I'm gonna get it with the pinky and the thumb. No, it's gonna fall. All right, but you get the idea, right? And you can play around with that some if you want to, releasing fingers and just seeing how little effort you can exert to hold the bow and it not fall off the violin or viola, or fall out of your hand for that matter. And it's really important to have this super light grip because we want our fingers to be pliable. We want them to move. They're very alive when we're bowing. They're not static. They're not gripping the bow. They need to be like springs, as I read in a Galamian book. He describes them as. And if we're really gripping the bow tightly, then they stiffen up and we get all kinds of problems from that. We can't play well. So really nice, relaxed, lucid fingers. That's all you need to hold your bow. You don't need to exert any extra effort or weight there. All right, there you go. That's the end of this, and it was a lot of stuff. So again, I recorded this largely for my own benefit because I might need to reference it at some point. But if you got some use out of it, that's great. You can hit like. Lets other people know that this is a useful video and that they should watch it. They might get some value out of it. You can also hit subscribe. Lets me know I should keep making these videos. All right, thank you. Have a good day.